I would suggest muting yourself. You can make your own decision whether you want to have your video on or not. We're going to have a very active conversation after the presentation part, where we will want you to unmute and talk and ask your questions. And at the beginning, we'll have a presentation with Gaye. So welcome, everyone. We have about 30 people signed up, so hopefully a few more will be joining us. But we are going to be recording it, so if you need to jump off and jump back on, or you missed part of it, you can catch the recording as well. And hiding here behind two different light bulbs is Casey, our program manager for Ear for All. See, Casey likes to hide. We are going to get started right at 4. And we'll see if we get a few more folks.
Step away to get rid of this phone.
Okay. While we're waiting, if you don't mind typing in the chat box, I don't know all of you. And for Gaye and myself as the presenters, it'd be really helpful to know what kind of business you're in. And you'll also be telling all the other people. So I think you probably all know how to chat in Zoom by now, so I don't have to teach anybody. If you want to just tell us what your business is, that would be wonderful. And Gaye is back.
Turned off my cell phone, forgot the office phone.
All right, I think we're going to get started. I did ask folks as you're coming on, you do need to mute yourself because we're in meeting mode, not webinar mode. So you're in control of all of that. And I think I'm going to start off by just reading some of who's on the call. We have a wedding and event planner. That's the only person who wants to share what she does. Okay. I know the rest of you are in business. We have a media website, by the way, Berkshire's. Kate's in our E4All Accelerator. Hi, Kate. Glad to see you. Lori from East Hampton has handcrafted gifts and jewelry honoring and celebrating achievements and sisterhood for schools and sororities. Lori, I think I might have met you in Holyoke. All right. Yes, I did meet you. I remember now. Okay, we are going to get started. I'm going to share my screen. We are recording today. We're going to record the beginning and the end where there's the dialogue. We will not be recording. So let me go into presentation mode. View present. There we go. Okay, welcome to E4All's first ever deep dive. The idea of a deep dive is that you learned a lot in your E4All program, at least we hope you did, and some of you are still in it. But there's probably a body of knowledge, stuff you need to know about as you grow your business that you're not going to find somebody to present to you in an easy, palatable way. So we created deep dives, and we're going to have one every month. This is the first one, and this one we came up with by talking to the program staff at the different E4All sites. And they said this is when they hear back from the people who are in their program and they go, I need more help with this. So we said, let's put together a deep dive. I have recruited today to help me Gaye Weinberger from Organization Inc., who's down in Great Barrington, which is part of our E4All Berkshire's community. And she will be taking it away from me in just a moment. I know there's some people here, maybe a few, who are new to E4All, so I just stuck a slide in here. If you don't know what E4All is, you absolutely should. It stands for Entrepreneurship for All. This is a picture of our first cohort here in the Berkshires. Lots of businesses started. We run pitch contests. We run a business accelerator. We run these deep dives. In Berkshire County, we also run an online business accelerator. So lots of programs to help you get started. Here's what we're going to do today. We're going to have an interactive presentation, and pretty soon I'm going to shut up. You're going to hear from Gaye, and she's going to be presenting off of her computer. But I'm going to keep my microphone on, and I'll ask her any questions, or I'll field your chat questions as we go. By the way, if you submitted a question ahead of time, Gaye has already worked it into her presentation because she's that good We got it and we sent it to her. Then we're going to stop the recording part, because each of you has different issues with your hiring. And I don't know what it is. I know Vaughn is the event planner. Maybe it's, do I hire contractors? Do they become employees? How do I define which it is? I want you to have enough time with Gaye's amazing experience and energy to get your questions answered, not just in a general sense, but your specific questions. So the last 20 to 30 minutes are going to be your opportunity to ask your questions yourself and get the answers you need. And we'll have a few polls going as well during the presentation. So Gaye and I talked about this. I hate it when other people introduce me, because I want to introduce myself. I just want to tell my story. So I decided that she should also introduce herself. She's fantastic. I met her through a Berkshire Business and Professional Women. She is an amazing person, really knows her stuff. And we did talk about Gaye making her presentation available to you. So there are lots of bullet points on some of her slides, which normally I would tell people, don't do that. Well, this is the different one. This is deep dive. We want you to get this level of detail, and we don't want you to go crazy taking notes. So Gaye has made it available to us. We'll put it in a PDF, and we'll also send you the recording link afterwards. So without further ado, Gaye, you can take control by choosing to share your screen, and from here on in, it's her.
All right, well, thank you, Deb. That was a great introduction. I really appreciate that. I currently work for Organization Inc. We do outsourced HR and accounting services for small businesses. And I'm having a little bit of trouble. There we go. Moving over to my presentation. There we go. And I come to this with 30 some years of experience, having worked for small and large corporations and been part of 3 startups. So been where you are, trying to figure it all out and knowing when I should do things and why I should do them, and what's important and what can wait a little while. So hopefully today we'll answer some of those questions. I do come from most of my experience has been operational. It's only been in the last 5 or 6 years that I've gotten really into the HR side of the business, but I am certified through the Society for Resource Management as a senior consultant for HR. So happy to help you in any way I can possibly, and looking forward to your questions as we move through this process.
Right, as Gaye sets up her presentation mode, we're gonna, Casey, can we fire off the first poll? I should probably tell you all, Casey's hiding in the background, running this for us. Thank you, Casey, our program manager. We're just asking you a very simple question so that Gaye can make sure that she's talking to the audience. Do you already have employees or independent contractors working for your business? If you don't mind taking just a moment so she knows you know, the level of experience you already have in this employee world.
Okay, so looks like most of you don't, but a few of you do. So hopefully we'll answer some questions that you may be having, and for the rest of you, give you a great idea about how do you know when to make that first step and why.
Terrific. I'm going to end the polling. We really just sort of wanted to take your temperature and see who was on the call. So we're going to close that. And there you go. Gaye, you're on.
Okay. So today, what we hope to cover is the basic starting point. And that first starting point is always registering your business. And you may or may not already made that step based on the type of business you are. We're going to talk a little bit about the type of employees you want, how many, why does that make a difference, how to know what tax accounts you need to be setting up if you're going to run payroll. Should you use a payroll service, or you should try to do it yourself? We're also going to talk and take it past just getting yourself set up for payroll, but then the process of finding those first employees and making sure that you're doing it in a really smart way, and then how to bring them on board and talk about some just very basic employment laws that everyone should know. And then, even though it's a little bit past that part of, you know, my first employee, let's talk about managing performance, because you put a lot of energy into finding those employees. You want to retain them and managing performance is going to be all about that. So first and foremost, as you go through this process, you have to register your business. And if you've been working as a freelancer or just as yourself and just paying your taxes through your Social Security number, you may not have gone the step to fully register your business yet. But in order to go forward with employees, you are going to need a federal employer identification number or an EIN. Any state registration or a tax account that you try to set up, it's going to ask you for your federal EIN. And then you also need to make sure that you've registered in your state through the Secretary of State website and that you've registered your business there. One of the things that I always tell people to be a little conscious of now that we're in this virtual world is whether or not your employees, as you're looking forward, live and work in the same state that you've registered your business. So if I'm a Massachusetts business, it's not uncommon for me to have employees that might live in Connecticut or New York because we all sit very close to the borders. And that's fine, particularly if they're coming into Massachusetts to do business. But if I hire somebody in New York and they're going to work from home and they're going to deliver service out of New York, you've now created what they call nexus. And that means the state of New York says, that's great that you're a Massachusetts company. I want you to register in New York and I want you to pay payroll taxes in New York as well for that employee. So it can get complicated real fast in our new virtual world. It's all about where the employee lives, but are they also delivering service? So I have a client who does yoga sessions, and because the person teaching the class does it from her home in New York, we now have Nexus in New York and we have to register.
So if Vaughn is planning, she's right on the Rhode Island, Massachusetts border. If she is a registered business in Massachusetts, runs an event in Rhode Island and has an employee from Rhode Island, all of a sudden she's responsible in 2 states?
She can be, yes, because that employee lives and is now delivering service in Rhode Island. And that's the tricky part of it. It becomes, it's worth a conversation sometimes with the state. They're not going to try and make you pay tax if it's not correct. But it's really about where is the service being delivered. And if you're a catering service on the border and you're delivering services in both states, as a business, you probably should be registered in both states as well. That makes sense?
Yes.
All right, so who is this first employee? And oftentimes, particularly with startups, we start with 1099s because we don't really know yet. Do we need a full-time employee? Is it a part-time employee? Maybe it's just a casual seasonal worker. These things all kind of come into play. If you're hiring casual or seasonal employees, it's okay to have them as 1099s. They are not permanent employees of your business. They kind of come and go with the season or their own desires to work. Are they part-time and working for someone else? Because if they are, then it's more clear that they might be a 1099, particularly if they're doing the same kind of work. And you see this a lot, such as the catering business, where you've got seasonal workers who may be working for 3 or 4 different catering services over the course of the summer and taking whichever jobs coincide with their schedules and they think will be the most opportune. It can also be true a lot in sales distribution. If you're hiring someone to rep your services for you, oftentimes these are 1099s or contractors, and they may not be just selling your services. They may be doing distribution or sales for another company. Those are clearly 1099s. When it gets a little tricky is when they're doing something that's a core function of your business and they're doing it only for you, and particularly if they're doing it on a full-time basis. That creates, whether you call them a 1099 or you put them on payroll, the IRS, if they audit, will come back and say, no, they're a full-time employee and you should be giving them all the same benefits as you're giving your regular employees who are on payroll. And as small as you are, you think that's not a concern right now, and it probably isn't. But as you grow, you don't want those kind of challenges. And as employees get smarter, I have another client who had just this situation. He had someone that he had brought on as a seasonal employee and then started working them year round on a full-time basis. And that employee, when they left and wanted to file for unemployment, came back and said, oh, I was a full-time employee. You should have had me on payroll and been paying unemployment taxes for me.
So as the employer, it is easier to pay somebody as a freelancer or an outside contractor, or what we're calling here a 1099, right? Because then I don't have to pay benefits or report them and all the rest of that. So I think my bias is to always try to do a 1099 instead of bringing an employee in. But there are certain criteria. Like I remember hearing that if you supply them with equipment and or you require them to be in a certain place, that by definition means they can't be a 1099, right?
That is correct. So if the by definition, if they're a 1099, they are in charge of their own schedule. You may be contracting them to deliver something and you may give them a deadline for delivery, but when and how they work really makes them a contractor. You may have to give them some product if they're selling or distributing for you that they can show. But if you're not reimbursing them for travel, if you're not reimbursing them because they took somebody out to lunch trying to make a sale, then that clearly is a 1099. They are responsible for themselves. As soon as you start moving in to subsidize what they're doing and you're dictating what hours they're working and you're dictating the days of the week that they work, they start to become more and more what we would consider a full-time employee or even a part-time employee, but someone who should be on your payroll. And it is tempting to leave them as a 1099 because as you see, when we talk about setting up payroll, there are employer portions of taxes that have to be paid. It's not just that you're withholding tax from their pay, but employers are responsible for paying portions of taxes as well.
I know that there's a rule of thumb that you use when you're doing financial projections that an employee actually costs what 1.3 times what their actual pay is because you have all the other costs associated with it. So again, as a potential employer, boy, I really would like to avoid paying 1.3 times if I can avoid it, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we start looking at the number of taxes. And that number that you use for forecast budgeting can go anywhere from 1.2 to 1.3, and it just depends on the level of benefits and the state that you're operating in and what their taxes are.
Okay, anybody else have any questions about this 1099 or employee thing before? Because I know that this is sort of mission critical to deciding whether you even need the rest of this webinar. So I just want to make sure I answer any questions if anyone has them.
Yeah. And always think about whether or not they're actually core to your business. I think that's the biggest test. If they're providing a function that's core to your business, they are probably an employee and should probably be on payroll. So going through that process, now you've decided, well, yep, I need to put them on payroll. So you're going to do two things. You've got to set up for federal payroll taxes, and then you're going to have to set up for state. And on the federal side, you've got your EIN, right? You've registered. Now you need to set up an EFTPS registration. And that's the website where you go to do your funds transfer. It's electronic funds transfer. So as you're withholding those payroll taxes, they have to be paid to the federal government. You're going to do that through that website. And there's income tax withholding that comes straight out of your employee's pay. There's FICA, which is made up of Medicare and Social Security, and the employee pays a portion, employers pay a matching portion, and that has to be filed on a quarterly basis on a Form 941. And then there's federal unemployment tax, which also has a employer portion. It does cap at a certain level, and at some point in the year, once you hit that cap, you'll see that starting to go down. But it's another quarterly filing that has to be done. And this is just the federal side that you're going to be looking at. Then using Massachusetts as our example, and this will be true of every state, you're going to have to go and register with the state. Like in Massachusetts, it's Department of Revenue. In New York, it's the New York State Taxation and Finance. You're going to do another 941 filing that you have to do at the state level on a quarterly basis. That's for the withholding, because Massachusetts has income tax. Not every state has income tax. If you're operating in Florida, there is no state income tax. Texas has no state income tax, so that's one thing that goes away. You're going to have to do a Department of Unemployment Assistance filing, the DUA, and you're going to have to file a wage and detail report, which is basically detailing every single employee, what you've paid them, and then what the assessment for unemployment is to you, the employer. In Massachusetts, we have the new Mass Paid Family Leave, and that's another amount that has to be held from the payroll check. It's taken from the employee. New York State has a similar program. You're seeing more and more states go to a paid family leave. Another payroll little calculation that you have to make. And then every state's a little quirky. In Massachusetts, we have what is called the Employer Medical Assistance Contribution. That is employers having to pay a portion for their employees who are on mass health. Because Massachusetts requires all people to have health insurance, and a lot of people get their health insurance through the Mass Health Program, not through their employer. The state came back and said, well, we need those employers to kind of help pay for that. So it's another little thing that starts, coming out of that check. And then there's Workforce Training Fund. Employers are expected to help support mass hire. And a lot of states do have a workforce training fund of some type where employers are paying money in to help with employee training programs. So you can see how fast, once you put somebody on payroll, it gets really complicated. So whether you're paying weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly, you've got taxes that you're withholding from the employee's check that they're responsible for. You're making matching or calculated amounts that you're responsible for, has to be withheld. You're going to deposit some of it in the payroll period. Others get quarterly filings and you pay it. If you don't have a separate payroll account, it's something I always tell people to consider, because you should transfer the tax money over into that separate payroll account so that you know it's there waiting when quarterly filing time comes. Nothing worse than getting to the end of the quarter and realizing that you don't have enough money sitting in the bank to pay not only your overhead, but now your payroll taxes.
So, Gaye, we have quite a few micro businesses here. So these are folks who are, one-person shops. Hopefully they won't be forever, right? But I was a one-person shop for a long time as a business coach, and my accountant actually had me start taking payroll for myself, because if I didn't do that, I wasn't paying into Social Security and Medicare and all the rest of that. And she only drew payroll, I think, for me once a year, but otherwise I wasn't paying into the system. Can you talk a little bit about how you reached that decision as a solo person?
Yeah, and I do think that is a deep conversation you have with your accountant. They know by looking at your books and working with you on your financial projections, they can help you figure where that point is where it makes sense. Oftentimes, the younger you are, the more you might not worry too much about Social Security quite yet. The older you get, the more you realize, nope, I need to be worrying about Social Security. I need some money in there. It also depends on how much you're able to pay yourself, because if you can't really, you're at that stage where you're just sweat equity. You're just putting in a ton of your sweat, hoping for the value of the business to grow. And you may not be able to pay yourself. It may not make sense quite yet to start taking taxes out. But you can do it once a year. You can do it quarterly. I've been a freelance contractor, and I did pay taxes quarterly. And I paid in to Medicare and Social Security. as well as having my federal withholding taken care of, just so that when I came to the end of the year and it was time to file taxes, I didn't end up in a situation where I owed a lot of taxes to the government. But that's why you want to have that conversation, because it's really about forecasting what you think your situation is going to look like and how much tax will you owe when it comes April next year for what you've paid yourself this year. A lot of times they'll just coach you to take it as owner's draw as opposed to paying taxes and putting yourself on full payroll. There's a couple of things in here we're going to talk about today that really are deeper conversations with an accountant to really look at your financial projections. So great resources, and I have a list of resources for you at the end, but as you're starting your business, a lot of states on the Secretary of State site have great resources for you that are, starting a business in this state checklist. And it will walk you through everything you need to do and give you website addresses for the different departments within the state that you're going to want to connect to. And most of them will provide something like this to help you start forecasting payroll taxes. This happens to be an example of one that Massachusetts does for unemployment insurance. If you're a brand new business, this is kind of a little calculation that they'll take you through to help you estimate what that's going to cost you. Because again, these are things that the employer are responsible for.
Can you walk me through this, since I don't know what this table means?
Yeah, so really what it's doing is it's coming up and it's saying that the taxable earnings for the payroll is $15,000, right? And it's coming through and saying, okay, there's no employee deduction, you're a brand new business. And then it shows that for 2020, the employer unemployment tax rate is going to be 0.58% of your payroll wages, and that there's this 0.056, right? So, a really minuscule amount that is a surcharge for that workforce training fund that we talked about, where they help you to, or they expect you to help pay for mass hire employment training programs. And one of the things that you need to understand, and that's why this one's a little tricky, and you'll see some, wow, how does it go from 0.94 to 14%? How do I know where I fall? As a new business, you're going to be on the really low end. What happens every year is that the Department of Unemployment goes out and looks and says, how many people working for that business came in and applied for unemployment assistance and qualified? And how many dollars did we pay out from that business for unemployment benefits? And then they come back, and each year they'll issue you a piece of paper that says your unemployment experience rating is X. And it's going to be somewhere between that 0.94 and that 14.37%.
Which is why employers hate it when their employees file for unemployment, because it hits them in a higher tax rate in perpetuity.
Absolutely. And what you really need to do is be aware. There's, this is, we're going to talk towards the end of the presentation about termination, but unemployment is all about termination. Be sure you have good cause for terminating somebody. Be aware that if somebody resigns, you're not responsible for their unemployment. If somebody abandons their job, they don't show up for work for 3 days and you haven't heard from them, so you fire them, that's considered resignation pay, job abandonment. Again, you're not responsible for paying unemployment for that kind of person. So once you get registered and you've got employees, you're going to have a login to the DUA site, and you're going to get an email, and it's going to tell you you've got correspondence waiting. You go within a day, and you open up that correspondence and you look to see what is it that they're telling you, because 9 times out of 10, that correspondence is letting you know that somebody's filed for unemployment and listed you as the employer. And you have an opportunity, it's a fixed window of time where you can contest that charge. The first thing you get is a questionnaire that just says, hey, did this person work for you, and tell us how they left. And that's where you get that opportunity to say they quit. or they got fired for this reason. And then you'll get a wage report request, and then there will be a determination that will say, oh, we decided you're not liable, or they'll come back and say, well, we think you are liable, and here's the maximum amount that you'll be liable for. That maximum amount is 26 weeks of whatever that employment determination is for that individual. You know, because 26 weeks is how long you're eligible for unemployment once you file. So this is just, like I said, it's a little bit of math to go in and layer it in. You can be really detailed and do this for each one of your tax accounts, or you can just take that the average is somewhere between 1.2 and 1.3. And what really pushes it up to 1.3 is if you're offering other benefits, such as any kind of insurance or paid vacation. Those are the things that are going to push up that ratio when you're calculating what we call a weighted or fully loaded payroll rate.
One clarification before you move on. How long does an employee have to work for you before they can claim unemployment insurance?
Oh, not very long at all. Not very long at all, very honestly. It can usually within a couple of days, if somebody quits in the first week, you're not going to be liable for anything. But after that, it starts to kick in. It's not a very long period of time. Now, keep in mind that they're going to look at all employers over the past, year. So you're not the only employer who's going to get tapped on the shoulder. And they do tend to go, based on the most current, whoever, if you've terminated somebody, you're more likely to be the one tapped. And then they'll start looking at prior, once the benefits run out that they've been able to collect from you, they'll start looking at prior employers.
Okay. Casey, why don't you fire off poll number 4 about using a payroll service? I just wonder if anyone, I know it's not in the right order, but if anyone on the call has used a payroll service, or if you currently are using one. I know that Lenny's on here and he has a bigger company, so he's probably a yes, but I bet the majority is no. Yeah, it looks like a couple are yes, and everyone else is no. Okay, I think we can end the polling, and let's talk about, I have to tell you, after reading all of those things that I need to keep up on, it makes me want to pay a payroll service company.
It does, doesn't it? And I would tell you that, it's always a difficult decision, payroll service company or not. Now, if you're a bigger company, it's not a big decision. Once you start inching up 10 to 25 employees and bigger, you want to have a payroll service company. It's just too much work. When it's just you, or it's you and 1 or 2 employees, there are ways for you to do it yourself. The filing isn't overly complicated. It's certainly the forms are things that you can walk through. It's just a matter of making sure that you're keeping really good records if you're going to do it yourself. We've done it for some small employers. There are actually great tools out there that you can use. Some of them are even free. If you go in and type in payroll calculator, you will find that there's a lot of tools out there. And they will actually even print a pay stub for you.
Well, the thing that makes me reflect about this is that there were so many small businesses that did not apply for the PPP loans because they didn't have the record keeping that they needed to show the government who their employees were and how much they were paying. So not that hopefully, we're going to have another PPP, but I think the whole concept of keeping accurate records and really knowing what's going on financially in your business. But I mean, on the downside, it's the monthly fee, but I mean, how big a monthly fee are we talking?
It can be very small. There's some good local companies that run payroll, and they can be, and they try to work with small businesses, particularly startups. It can be $25, $30 a month for them to run everything, because keep in mind what they're going to do is they're going to calculate your payroll, they're going to print your checks, they're going to do direct deposit. They're going to be the ones making all those filings for you and doing all the funds transfer for you. If you choose to do it yourself, my recommendation is always, one, make sure that you're setting up at least payroll accounts in your accounting system, whether you're using QuickBooks or some other simple tool. Make sure your chart of accounts includes, net wages and state tax and federal tax, so that you can show in your accounting books that you're tracking this. And then, I mean, you can be really down and dirty about it. I've set up, Excel spreadsheets where it tracks every pay period. And I use one of those free payroll calculators where all I do is put in the gross. I check off all the tax accounts that I need calculated. And they are state specific. So even like in the state of Massachusetts, they'll have little boxes for you to say paid family leave. And then it will give you what the net check is, and it literally will pull out print out a paper check stub for you that you can use. And I record all of that, every single one of those categories, employee and employer taxes, in this big spreadsheet. And it's that spreadsheet that I sum and use for filing on the quarterly filings. So can you do it yourself? You absolutely can. What you want to weigh, is it worth $30 of your time every month?
Well, I think your time, it's going to take a lot longer than the $30, but that's for everybody to calculate. Here's the other thing, and I am very cautious about this with the small businesses I work with. You can't walk away from this, even if someone else does it. I mean, I've heard horror stories, and I'm sure you have in your space, of a payroll company that did something wrong. And ultimately you have to pay the difference. I know someone who couldn't collect Social Security because he thought for 20 years this guy had been paying in, and he hadn't been, but he never checked it. So you still need to keep an eye on the outside service, even if you pay the money.
You do, and they're going to send you reports. You're going to get a zip file full of reports. There's going to be the debit, because here's the one thing about a payroll company that you need to be aware of. Make sure that you've got the cash flow, because this is the difference. When you get ready to file it at the end of the quarter, if you don't have the money, you can still file and make a late payment. And it'll cost you, because there'll be penalties and interest. But you can do it. A payroll company will not do that for you. As soon as a payroll company figures out you don't have the money to make the quarterly tax payments, they're going to drop you because they don't take that risk. And so it is important from a cash flow standpoint to know, and that's why I say setting up a separate payroll account where you're putting the money over there and knowing that it's there and that it can't be touched for other things. What a payroll company is going to do is, when they run payroll on Friday, on Thursday, they're going to yank that money out of your bank account, and they're going to put it in their bank account. And they're going to make sure that the taxes get paid, that have to be paid per payroll period, and they're going to put the money aside for the quarterly payroll taxes. You're going to get a zip file, and it's going to show you that debit report of how much money they took. It's going to give you a breakdown by payroll checks. It's going to, it comes with 5 reports. And as Deb says, the onus is on you to check it. Now, they are liable if they make an error in a calculation. So if they've been calculating paid family leave, or they've been calculating unemployment insurance incorrectly, and you have given them all the documentation you have, and there was no reason for them to have made that error, they become liable for that. And we have gone back with payroll services on behalf of clients to say, no, we gave you all the correct information, and you're the one that made the error. So it's your job to pay the penalties and fines associated.
I wonder if there are 2 people who responded, yes, they use payroll services. If you have your chat box open, can you tell us, was it a good experience? Was it a big company? Was it a small company? I'm just interested to hear from the 2 who are or have used them. If you want to make a comment, I don't want to interrupt here. Let's see. All right, they're staying silent, so I guess you can keep going.
Yeah, and just one last thing I'll mention is garnishments, because these do come up. Typically, it's childcare garnishments. or child support garnishments. You'll get a notice from the state once they figure out where somebody's working. If they're behind on their child support payments, that's another where you have to withhold it from their pay and you have to remit it back to the state, who then makes sure that the custodial parent gets the money. It's nice to be able to hand all that off to payroll service companies as well. There's just a lot to running a payroll.
Lori tells us she's had a very small company with a fantastic experience, which I'm delighted to hear.
Yeah, there are some really great companies in the Berkshire area, but everywhere I've ever been, there have been good opportunities. I feel like I just missed a slide.
Yeah, I saw a slide go by.
Yeah. How do I get back?
You'll be able to go hit the back arrow.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do.
Previous.
Yeah, I've got the whole screen. So I'm looking for the little back arrow.
All the way on the left is all the way, right where you were, all the way back. There you go. One more.
This one? There we go. There we go. Insurance. So now that you've registered with the state, one of the things the state's going to come back and say is, do you have worker comp insurance? It's a really, it kind of goes hand in hand with unemployment. They want to make sure that if you are a employer in their state, that you are taking proper care of your employees, and a big piece of that is going to be workers' comp. So it really is essential to your business to have that. It's a huge protection for you should somebody become injured. And know that those injuries can be not just physically wherever you are working, but it's an interesting challenge now that we're working virtually. If someone is working for you and gets injured in the home, it will be a little complicated, but it could turn into a worker comp case. And that's why when we have virtual workers who are working from home, we always tell our clients, make sure that you've given them a list of what is a proper work area, and that they've signed off, that they understand that it's their responsibility to create a proper work area.
Hey, where do you get workers' compensation insurance?
You get that from almost any big insurance company, but if you're working with a broker on general liability insurance, they can also typically help you with your workers' comp. You can also go to the state site and they will give you a list of approved worker comp insurance companies. I find that if you're working with an insurance broker, rather than go directly to a carrier, let the broker do the work for you and do some comparison shopping for you. And workers' compensation insurance, the cost of it's going to be based on a couple of things. They're going to look at the industry you're in, because every industry has its own rating for how dangerous or safe it is. They're going to look at your job classifications. What kind of workers do you have? If you're in the food industry, management is rated at a different worker comp rate than the people in the kitchen. As you can imagine, kitchens have more worker comp cases than the manager who's out there greeting guests and seating them. They're going to look also at your total payroll. All of those things factor into how they decide what your insurance policy is going to cost. And then year over year, they're going to look at what they call your run-loss experience. And that's how many claims did you file, how big were those claims, and what kind of claims were they. And I've seen people get denied renewal because they were just big claims and they were almost all safety issues where the proper safety precautions were not being taken. I've seen businesses who have a lot of little claims not get an increase at all, because the little claims were the kind of things that just happen. And I'll take food industry again. No matter how safe you are, you're dealing with hot stoves, you're dealing with sharp knives, little accidents happen. But if you can demonstrate that they were minor in nature, which indicates that they were just someone, slipped, as opposed to somebody dropped a huge vat of hot oil and burned 3 people in the kitchen. Those are the kinds of things that they're going to be looking at. But it is important to have workers' comp if you have employees. And one of the things you want to understand is for your industry, what are your OSHA requirements? There are safety standards. And if you're not following those safety standards, things aren't going to go well for you on a worker comp claim. When a worker comp claim gets filed, the first thing you do is you get a call from adjusters who say, okay, can you tell me, was there signage, you know, that the floor was wet? You know, was there proper clearance? Were there railings on those stairs? They're going to ask a litany of questions that you need to be prepared to answer. But this is, again, where your carrier and your broker can be really helpful for you. There isn't a carrier out there who isn't happy to send someone to your site and do an inspection. And I often remind, especially new businesses, once you've got a physical presence, a physical site that you're working in, ask your carrier to do a walkthrough with you, because they're going to point out the things. They're going to make suggestions. They're going to say, you know, see those stairs, maybe if you could get some rubber.
But then you better pay attention to what they say.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're going to file a claim and they go, you never put the handrail in.
Right. Very true. But it is a great resource, I have to tell you, because they see things that you don't see. It's what they're there for. And they'll give you some training suggestions. You know, I will tell you, having worked in a number of different industries, regardless of the industry, the worker comp claims that I see the most frequently are slips, trips, and falls. You know, people just not paying attention, or businesses not being careful to make sure, particularly in winter months, that they're keeping the floor dry, that they've got mats out where they should be, that if you've got uneven flooring, that you're paying attention to marking that, stringing extension cords across the room. There are things that, you know, we all do, but you want to make sure, and it's okay to do that, but then tape them down, you know, make sure you've got a sign. They're not going to tell you not to do those things. They're going to tell you how to do them safely. And then put up some safety posters that just remind people that there's a way to do things. You know, there's a proper way to lift. There are great videos out on YouTube, free, that you can put your employees through. And they're literally called things like proper lifting technique, slips, trips, and falls. Those are the kinds of things that, if you can tell your insurance company that you do an annual training on slip, trips, and falls and proper lifting technique, they're going to be like, yo, you're the kind of a company we want to write business for.
All right, we have to move on. I really want to talk about COVID, but I know we don't really have time to dive into it. And we have a bunch more slides, and I want to leave time for questions. I know a bunch of people have come on late, so let me just tell you, Gaye is going to go till probably a little bit after 5, maybe 5 after, 10 after, with her presentation. And then we're opening the lines up, and we're hoping to get some good dialogue going. We already have 1 or 2 people waiting in the wings to ask their questions for you. So let's keep going.
The only thing I'm going to tell you is make sure that you went to the Mass site if you're a Massachusetts business or wherever state you're in, and look at their COVID-19 requirements for reopening, and then just make sure that you have those signs posted in your place of business. That's going to be the most important thing that you need to do for COVID-19. So job description, if you're going to have employees, write a job description. You're going to get a copy of these slides. These are all things you need to address in a job description. But it's important that when you have employees, they understand what they're responsible for. Again, this is a worker comp help. This is an unemployment issue help. This is a termination help. All of these things help you manage your business better. So when you write a job description, I always tell people, don't put stuff in there that doesn't matter. You know, I see so many people put, you know, must be experienced in Microsoft Office. Really? Really? How often is that person? Unless they're really working with Word and Excel every day, that should not be a requirement of the job or a performance measurement. It makes sure that you're putting things in there that matter. And then make sure that your employees are signing off on their job description. When you first day of onboarding, you go over the job description, you get them to sign it, it goes in their employee file. There's never going to be a question again, what was it supposed to be in their job?
Is it kosher to have like a 3-month trial for somebody who's new? Maybe that's a question you answer later on.
Yeah, I do talk about it a little bit later on, but it is, but most states are employment at will states, which means I can hire or fire you anytime I want, and it means you can quit anytime you want. I don't have to give a reason, you don't have to have a reason. So the 90 days sounds great. It's really more about benefits and holding off on certain benefits until somebody's been with you a certain period of time. And it's about the fact that in those first 90 days, you really should be doing frequent assessments for the individual. It doesn't matter whether you've had them for 30 days or 90 days, and you can put that out there, but the truth is if they have a good reason to think that you've done a termination for no cause, they're going to have a case. Doesn't matter what you've put in your book. So
my book, that's scary. What if do I need an employee handbook now?
Well, we're going to talk about that in a minute. Let's talk about recruiting, because this is always a challenge as well. And it's a particular challenge if you happen to be living in the Berkshires. This is a tough market sometimes to recruit in, but I find that to be true of a number of seasonal places. You live in any place that's a seasonal industry is all about entertainment or, skiing in the winter. It does make it challenging to find year-round employees sometimes. There's tremendous hiring during the season and it becomes very competitive, and then in the winter it's not so competitive, but they don't stay with you, they leave because they can get a better paying job in the winter or somewhere else. When you're doing recruiting, you want to anticipate your planned hires. If your budget says that in 3 months you're going to hire somebody, then start looking in that 60, 90-day window. Always assume whoever you're hiring already has a job and that they're going to have to give notice. And always assume that it's going to take you at least a week or two to build a queue of people to start interviewing. And unless it's the perfect candidate, don't just hire the first person you interview. Really look for that person. I tell people skills are important, attitude, and whether they're a cultural fit for you is as important as their skill set. You can have the most skilled employee, but they don't fit your company culture and the direction you want to go, then it's not going to be a great, good hire for you long term. So really think about what you're looking for. When you do your job posting, don't put the whole job description there. That's way too much information. Make sure that you include at least a short paragraph giving them a sense of who you are as a company. Remember, everything is a sell, and you're selling you and your company right now to those employees. You just want to highlight the 4 to 6 key responsibilities. Definitely put compensation in there, even if it's a range. People are far more likely to respond if they know what the range is. And it saves you from talking to people who, when you tell them what you're willing to pay, go, ooh, no, I thought it was going to be a lot more than that. Waste of your time. And respond to all applicants, even the ones that just right off the bat you don't want. When we look at somebody and they don't have any qualifications, we still take the time to respond and let them know that we really needed someone with X qualification. What you want is a good reputation when you're recruiting. And that comes from responding to people, even if you're not going to hire them, because there's still word of mouth. And if you handle them well when you're rejecting them, they may know somebody who does have the qualification, and they're more likely to refer them to you.
So we just fired off the poll about if you have hired, do you have a formal application process? And if you could take a moment, because that's really part of the recruiting, right? You want to make sure you're getting the same standardized information from everyone.
You do.
And so far I have, for those of you hired, sort of something else, not applicable are the most answers.
Yeah, I would tell you, even if it's a small application, there's some tricks to an application. In states, you need to look at the state that you're in. For instance, in Massachusetts, we have banned the box. You can't ask about criminal activity. You can't ask about compensation. So those are things that you better not have on your application.
So
And
you can't ask them how much money they made at their existing job?
Nope, not in Massachusetts. It came in as part of the Massachusetts Equity Pay Act. And the idea is that women are suppressed in earnings because they traditionally earn less than men. And when they report that on their applications, employers don't feel compelled to offer them the same amount that they were going to offer a man who was making more money in his last job.
Wow.
So don't ask. You have a pay rate. And it should be for a man or a woman, regardless of what they may have been making in their last job. So really important to think about. Lots of great resources that you can use. Every state unemployment workforce development office here in Mass, it's Mass Hire. They will partner with you and really help you find people. Indeed, depending on the type of position you're looking for, can be very helpful, and you don't have to pay. I know people think that they do. You don't. Don't boost it. Take the free posting. Look for community papers. Reach out to other organizations in the community, the Immigrant Center, the Veterans Outreach Programs. It's a way to build a diverse workforce, which you really do want. And then just look for local job boards, and then leverage your social media. If you've got a good following, use your followers to help you find the right employee.
All right, Gaye, we have two questions. Is there an approved Massachusetts job application, like a generic one that businesses can use, or they're going to have to go write their own?
No, you can go out there, and let me tell you something. There isn't a form that you need as an employer in an HR realm that you can't find a template out on the website. You should never have to create anything from scratch. They are out there, and most of them.
But you want to make sure it's approved and legal and doesn't.
We do.
Right.
We do. And if you go to the Mass Hire team, they can provide you with a good template to use. You're still going to probably customize it depending on your type of position and what you care about. Knowing, but yes, you can absolutely do that.
And the second question is, are you allowed to ask about salary expectations? And that probably leads into the interview questions, which we're going to.
So let's talk about interviewing.
And actually, while you're starting, there's going to be another poll. I think this is our last one. Do you have a formal interview process? And I know it doesn't relate to everybody because not everyone has hired before, but this is our last poll trying to find out, when you're hiring, do you have a standardized interview process and questions?
Yeah. So while you're answering that poll question, that's how you get around not asking about compensation. Is you can ask what was your expectation? Absolutely. And we definitely ask.
Lenny. Very clever.
Yeah.
So this last poll, I guess it doesn't apply to everyone because they don't all have employees. So, 2 people have a standard interview process, 1 does not, and then 4 have something else.
Be interested in the something else. So let's talk about interviewing. I tell people do 2 phases. Do a phone screen from any applicants that you get. It does a couple of things. It gets some housekeeping things out of the way so that you don't waste time in a physical interview. It can be as short as 10 minutes, but it's just a call. One, you get to hear the sound of their voice and kind of get a first impression. It allows you to reiterate some things that you put in the job applicant that people sometimes ignore, such as, did you understand that this is, we operate 365 days a year, so, we are a 7-day-a-week business. Your weekends are required. It allows you to get that pay rate out there again. If you don't live on the bus route and transportation is a potential issue, it allows for you to ask that question. Do you have reliable transportation? Just some basic things to make sure that they can actually meet your minimum requirements. And then you can, right from that phone call, schedule your interview. In person, you want to make sure that you have a set series of questions and that you ask those questions of all applicants. Being an equal opportunity employer doesn't mean just once you've hired them. It means how you're treating all your applicants. And a lot of discrimination lawsuits are about the way in which people are hiring and about the fact that they're using visual cues or things that are being asked in the interview and making decisions based on factors other than qualifications. So a couple of hints: don't ever write on a resume, and everybody does it. Don't do it. You should keep a copy of every job applicant that you get. You should have your resume. If you haven't filled out an application, you want the application with the resume. If you do references, you want to keep a list of the references you spoke to and what they told you. And you don't want to have personally identifying things on that resume, that application, those notes. You don't want to indicate their race, their nationality, their sex, their gender identification, anything that could be construed as, oh, I wrote that down because that was a disqualifier for me. I won't hire somebody like that. So discrimination starts right there in that recruiting phase. And I tell people, be really conscious of it. And then remember that the interview isn't just about you trying to figure out if they're the right person for you. It's about them trying to figure out if you're the right company for them. And be sure that you are selling your company just the same way we talked about selling it in the job posting. Be ready in the interview to talk about your company, where you see your company going, what kind of team you're hoping to build, what the future holds for them, because you want to sell them an opportunity as well, and that this is going to be a great opportunity for them to get in on the ground floor. Really important. But again, have a written set of questions. Make sure you're asking all your candidates the same questions. Doesn't mean that, if somebody says something interesting, you can't pursue it. You absolutely can. It's just you want to be sure to have a base set that you're holding everybody responsible for. And then let's talk a little bit about the do's and the don'ts. In a job interview, nothing about age, gender identity, sexual orientation, ethnicity, nationality, marital, parental status, religious, political, disabilities, medical history, union history, compensation, criminal background. Nothing. You want to steer away from these topics. People will tell you things and you're like, no, I don't hear that. I just had back surgery. It's like, because you can't pursue that. Now, what you can say is, this job requires you to be able to lift 25 pounds on a regular basis. Are you able to meet that requirement? So you can be specific about what you need them to be able to do. And then you need to look to see if, with reasonable accommodation, you might be able to accommodate somebody who has a little bit of a challenge. And you really have to look at that. Someone might say that they're hard of hearing, and you're going to be putting them on the phone. Well, there are amplifiers that you can buy for phones that would make it easier for them to be on the phone. Just think about whether or not it's reasonable. And you're a startup, so there some things just aren't reasonable for you. You don't have the same kind of financial capabilities of a bigger company. But you do need to look and just say, is there some way we could make this work? Maybe they're in a wheelchair. Could you put a ramp? Even though right now you're not, accessible for someone with a disability, but how much would it cost you to put in a ramp? Is that a reasonable or unreasonable accommodation if they're absolutely the right person for you? So give some thought to those things, but steer away from these things. Don't let people draw you in.
All right, so here's the do nots. Where's the do's?
The do's, yeah. One thing I will say, never ask about childcare. Never ask somebody, do you have childcare, when they tell you they have 3 small children. Interview do's, be prepared. Have your list of questions. Make sure you've read the resume application. Don't be reading it for the first time in front of them. Make sure you've got your 5-minute elevator pitch about why you're a great company to work for. Anticipate questions that they may have. And this may be things like they're going to ask you, well, what kind of paid time off do you have? What kind of insurance benefits do you offer? Do we get holidays off? Are they paid? Those are the kinds of things. Think about the questions you'd be asking if you were out looking for a job today. And make sure you're ready to answer those questions for them. Check your own biases. Make sure that you're being as neutral as possible. Keep your mind open to every candidate. Sometimes we get a first impression of somebody by looking at their resume and making assumptions about their education because we see what school they went to or what area of town they lived in. You want to be as completely open as possible because that perfect candidate's never going to come wrapped in the perfect package sometimes. You really have to be willing to hear what they're saying to you and what it means. Make sure you've allocated the time. Turn off your phone, tell people that you're in an interview, don't knock on the door. Nothing worse than feeling like you were a priority when you came here to interview. Follow up to responses for more detail. Don't let them just say, well, yeah, I did a project that did this. Well, what was your role in that project? Did you lead the team or were you just part of the team? How did you approach that project? Those are the kinds of things, pull out some detail from them because that's going to really reveal who they are. Make sure that you clarify gaps of employment history. If somebody, shows that they were employed through 216 and then all of a sudden there's nothing until 218, ask them, can you tell me what you were doing? Some people have really good, things. Maybe they took a sabbatical. Maybe they had to take time off to care for a family member. But ask, it's important. Maybe they're trying to hide a job where they really screwed up. If you haven't gotten an application, get one. And that application should be asking them for references. And have a statement that gives you the authority to call those references and check them. Really important part of that process.
If we have time later, let's talk about what you can ask a reference, but I want to see if we can get through the next couple of slides. There's a couple of folks waiting in the queue, want to ask you a lot of questions.
Yeah. Offer letters, I suggest them for everybody. I don't care if they're hourly or salary, and it's just because it's a nice formal thing to do that outlines exactly what it is I'm offering you. And puts in a start date. And if you're doing any kind of background checks at all, make sure that you've got a clause in your offer letter that says it's contingent upon completing a successful background check, which, by the way, you cannot do background checks until someone has officially accepted an offer of employment. There is no such thing anymore as pre-employment background checks. And ask for written acceptance, and it can just be an email responding saying, yes, I accept this position. I know some people, particularly in startups and small businesses, think, should I be offering equity? Should I be offering stock? That is a conversation for you and your accountant, because that involves placing some kind of valuation on your company. And are you really ready for that? But if you're going to talk about it, make sure you know exactly what you're talking about, because this is where a lot of small companies get really burned. Employees get really upset and angry because they feel like they put in a lot of sweat equity and then they got nothing in return, that they traded off wages for the promise of, and there was never anything in writing that described what that was going to be. That is, if you're going to do equity in stock, it's not a fun, let's just sit over drinks and talk about the kind of opportunity you're going to have with me. It is a legal accountant decision about what that should look like and how it should be structured. Onboarding, day one, make sure you have a schedule and you know what you're doing with them. Remember, there's a bunch of paperwork you got to do for a new hire employee. You've got to have an I-9, which they need their ID. You need to see the ID physically to validate it. Your W-4 for the tax form. There are state specific tax forms. Very few people seem to use them. And the assumption always seems to be whatever you're doing on the federal, you're going to do as your Mass or your New York deduction. But it's worth having the state form on hand in case they want to do something different. If you've got an employee, make sure you've got an employee contact form with emergency contacts. God forbid something happens. to an employee. We've had employees who didn't show up for work, and we've had to call their emergency contacts only to find out that they were in the hospital. It puts your mind at ease and helps you track them down. You got that job description, you're going to make them sign it. If you have an employee manual, then you're going to go through it with them and make them sign it. If you don't, there are probably a few key policies that you should have that they sign. One of them is a harassment policy, because that is such a hotbed of activity these days. It's worth having, and there are great templates out there for harassment policies. Most state sites will have a harassment policy that you can download and use as a default. And then depending on your business, a couple of other key policies: health and safety, absolutely in these days of COVID, important. If you're in food service, a tip policy that makes sure that they understand how tips are going to be handled. So depending on your business, if you're not going to do a full employee manual, do a couple of key policy statements that they do sign. Make sure they get a tour of the work area, and if you do have any other employees at this point, make sure that you introduce them. And that even means vendors, other key relationships that you have. Employee handbook, these are the minimum elements that you want in an employee handbook, and they can be short paragraphs. A confidentiality statement doesn't have to be bigger than a paragraph. It just states, you know,
and I'm just going to reiterate for anyone who came on late, we are making these slides available to you, so don't write all of this down. We are going to send this to you. You can copy it later. And yes, you can go borrow this language from somewhere else, but you do need to have it.
Absolutely. There's tons of places where you can get standard language for this. In Massachusetts, there's state Massachusetts paid sick time. Vermont has it. A number of states do now. You can download the policy right from the state site. Same thing with paid family leaves for the states that have those. In fact, Mass requires you to have an employee sign this, and they provide the document. Also important, depending on your industry, to have drug and alcohol-free workplace statements. And that covers not showing up to work drunk or high, even though marijuana is legal. It's still no more legal than drinking to show up to work that way. Basic employment laws, make sure that you know from your state site what requirements there are, but they're pretty much standard these days. You know, work hours, if anybody works 6 hours or more, you've got to give them a 20-minute break. It doesn't have to be paid, but you do have to offer it. You will have employees who will tell you that you're supposed to give them a 15-minute break every 4 hours. That is not true. That is one of those cultural things that we grew up with, where everybody got a 15-minute break somewhere in the middle of their 4-hour shift. Not a requirement. The only requirement is to give them a 20-minute break if they work 6 hours or more. Make sure you understand your obligations for reasonable accommodations. You know, if somebody comes to work and tells you that they've got a broken leg and they need to be able to keep their leg elevated, that's a reasonable accommodation. Make sure if you're hiring minors, anyone under the age of 18, that you know what the rules are. During school year, there are special hours that they cannot work. They cannot work during school hours. You can't work, if you're 14 or 15, you can't work after 7 p.m. 16, 17, you can't work past 10 unless you're in the food industry, and then only until 10:15 if they close at 10. You just need to be aware of these things. Make sure that you know, depending on your industry, what certifications are needed. Do you need somebody on site who's first aid certified? If you're in the food industry, do you need somebody who's choke certified? You know, do you need an OSHA 10 if you're doing any kind of manufacturing? You need somebody on site. Make sure you've got your signage. You've got to have labor law posters up, both federal and state. There's some other safety signs that you need to have up. Make sure that your facility has met safety requirements, that you've got the appropriate aisle clearances, that you're up to fire code, that you're up to health code. Make sure that you've got your fire extinguishers posted, fire exit diagrams posted. There's lots of things. And whatever town you're in, typically the fire department's more than happy to come through and do a walkthrough and tell you what you need to do. Make sure you understand any state level compensation. A lot of states still have blue laws. where you get paid extra. Massachusetts is phasing theirs out, and so each year it becomes a little less. It used to be that you got paid time and a half. I think this year it goes down to 1.2 times until in 2 years from now, there's not going to be any extra pay for working on Sundays. So those are all state-specific things that you got to look at and make sure that
Gaye, I have to tell you, I mean, this is exactly what I wanted to have happen in our deep dive, because this is the level of detail that our small business owners need to have. But it makes me want to crawl in a hole and not grow my business.
I know, but it feels really overwhelming. But I'm going to remind you again that your local governments are really happy to help you. I really want you to believe that. If you pick up the phone and you call the building inspector, they will spend some time on the phone with you telling you what to look for. Same thing with your local fire department. I have not found that, right now it's a little challenging because so many offices are closed at the state and the local levels because of COVID. But in the past, I have not found that there isn't a local government that isn't happy, because they want new businesses to survive in their environment.
And these are really setup issues, right? Once you have some of these systems in place, employee number 2 is way easier than employee number 1 was, and so on. Let's get to managing performance, and then I want to have a little bit of Q&A.
Yeah. So managing performance should start on day 1. I got to be honest with you. Nothing frustrates me more than when I go into a new client site and I find out that people haven't had any kind of coaching or formal reviews done. A new employee, you should absolutely do a 90-day. If you're not doing one at the end of every month, I absolutely recommend that at the end of 90 days, you sit down and, using the job description, walk through and talk about each area and where they're doing well, where they're not. You should always be doing an annual performance review, and it is an annual performance review. It is not an annual salary review. How you choose to make decisions about increasing pay does not have to be tied to a performance review. And it's important to remember that, because even if you're not raising pay based on that performance review, you need to do a performance review. And that happens a lot here in the state of Massachusetts, where our minimum wage workers are going up in pay every January. A lot of employers can't afford to give additional pay increases. So the pay increase is just whatever minimum wage is going up to. They still need to do an annual performance review. No employee should ever not know how well they're doing their job and be surprised by getting fired. They absolutely must. And ongoing coaching should be consistent. It takes no time at all to tell somebody they're doing a good job if they're doing a good job. And if you see something being done wrong, absolutely address it. Don't let it just, well, let me wait and see if it gets better. Make them aware. And it's coaching. It's not discipline, it's coaching. And the thing I remind people is praise in public, reprimand in private. Never take an employee to task in front of a customer, a vendor, or another coworker. It is so devastating to everybody. That's the kind of thing you do behind closed doors and have those private conversations with an employee. But praising, absolutely praise in public. Make them feel good about the things they're doing right, because it sets a great example for everybody else. And the other thing about managing performance is be specific. I hate when I read a performance review and it says, oh, your attitude was great. Or you do a really good job in customer service. Give me some examples. Tell me that you actually saw me do something good, or saw the results of what I did and knew that it was good. And the same thing for the negative. Don't tell me I'm just doing a bad job. Give me some specific examples so I know what you're looking for. If you've got one of those rating systems that, like 1 through 5 and 3 means that you're meeting expectations, I always tell an employee, listen, when I tell you 3 meeting expectations, you're doing a fantastic job, because I have high standards. And if you're meeting my expectations, you're doing great. Here's what you need to do to get to a 4. A performance review should be a conversation. It should not be you just reading to them what you've written on a piece of paper. and you need to make it that kind of engagement. And know when to transition to corrective action. If you are coaching, and it's not getting better, now it's time to take corrective action. And corrective action, I know people think, oh, it's got to be this certain sequence. You should always start with a verbal and let them know, hey, this is a verbal warning. The next time, if we're not seeing any improvement, it is going to be written. You do a written warning, there needs to be an action plan. It needs to be concrete. You need to tell them specifically what they need to do to improve, and you need to give them a reasonable amount of time to improve and schedule that follow-up meeting to make sure that they've improved. Again, the goal, as I tell people, is not to fire someone. The goal is to help them become a successful employee. You've put too much time and energy into firing someone like that. If you have to fire, make sure you have documentation. Make sure that you have those written warnings. Make sure that you've noted when you've had, coaching sessions. I tell people it's as simple as, if I'm walking the floor and I stop to show you how to do something because I've been seeing that you've been struggling with it, I will text myself a message to my email so that I have that record. Those are the important things you want to do when it comes to coaching.
Wow, that was so much. All right, why don't you stop sharing screen? And Kate Abbott has been very patient because her question was from